Hello, my little flowers. We are back at Halloween Horror Nights for the final night of the season. So we're just going to take it easy. We're going to do a couple houses, scare zones, all the things we want to do one more time before the official end of the night. But while we go through all that, we're going to take you through and we're going to rate all the houses and the scare zones that we thought were the best and the worst for this season. So with all that being said, let's go.
Mike the Bee, theme music.
So my number 5 scare zone is the Duality of Fear scare zone, which a lot of people have no idea is even a scare zone. It's kind of the entrance to Halloween Horror Nights. You get the neon sign that welcomes you into the event. This is where they have the Chainsaw Gang this year. If you get here early enough, you get to see the icons, which was sinister and surreal. Otherwise, it's just the Chainsaw Gang, some lights, some music. There's a lot of lights from the different gift shops, so it's not very dark or very Halloween-y. So that's why it's my number 5, because it just doesn't feel like a scare zone at all.
So my number 5 scare zone is the Duality of Fear. And if I'm to be honest with you, I mean completely and totally honest with you, I had no clue this was a scare zone. Like, I thought this was just where they staged the chainsaw people this year. I had no clue this was a scare zone. That's how bad it is. So that's why it's my number 5. And to be honest with you, these chainsaw guys are just annoying. So, number 5.
So my number 4 scare zone is Swamp of the Undead. I don't think I haven't said anything about the scare zone I haven't already said. It's too dark. You can't see anything. It's a swamp, I get it. It's supposed to be dark, but it's too dark. Use more theatrical lighting, do what you gotta do. Sometimes they turn on the fog machines way too heavy, so between it being dark and then the heavy fog, you just can't see. I think I've run into people, scare actors, all kinds of stuff. It's just not good. Like, it's not good. So that's why it's my number 4.
So my number 4 scare zone this year is the Demon Queens. It's because I'm really disappointed with this scare zone. This is normally my favorite scare zone area. They've done some really good stuff in the past, and it just really fell flat for me. It doesn't feel like there's really a theme. When they're up there talking, it just sounds like somebody's rambling on about nonsense. It was just not good. And so I had to give it a strong number 4.
So my number 3 for scare zone is the Demon Queen section. So this section still fell a little flat for me, but I feel like they were doing the best they could with what they had to work with. They had very few props in the area. It felt like the scare actors were just walking in circles. They did have the stage in the middle. Surreal came out. Surreal came out. She does her little thing. Okay, that's part of it. There's a show. But that's kind of it. That's all you get. They're demon queens. They're literally messing with your mind. So, I don't know. I feel like something else should be happening, at least on the sides when they're not doing the main show. Anyway, that's why I gave it number 3.
So my number 3 scare zone is Swamp of the Undead this year. And I gave it number 3 because it has potential. It has potential of being a really good scare zone. But as you're walking through, it's so dark, I can't tell if it's a scare actor or just somebody who's had a little bit too much to drink and is stumbling through. If they're wearing makeup, you really can't see it. It might be a monster. It might be, your fat Uncle Larry. So they really could have done a little bit more by maybe throwing some red light or something to just kind of backlight it a little bit, but still keep it dark. But it's just too dark this year. And normally this scare zone is a good scare zone. So I'm kind of disappointed, but it's my number 3.
So my number 2 scare zone is Enter the Blumhouse. If you love the Blumhouse franchise, this is the perfect scare zone for you. They have all your little favorites from all the different movies. We have Megan, we have Black Phone, you've got all the Purge movies. It's a great scare zone to get some great pictures and just kind of reminisce on the Blumhouse franchise. That's why it's my number 2 this season.
So my number 2 scare zone this year is the Torture Fair. And the reason it's my number 2 is we watched the Game of Thrones before we came this year, and I absolutely love the Game of Thrones, and this just kind of brings us right back into that medieval era. So it's my number 2, and it's a solid number 2 for me.
So my number 1 scare zone this year is the Torture Fair. I really like how they utilize the New York section of the park with all the different props, the scare actors, the stage with a little show on it. They did a really, really good job. It's lit really well. So I really enjoyed the scare zone this year. So that's why it's my number 1 for this season.
So my number 1 scare zone for this year is the Blumhouse Scare Zone. I just really love Megan. I think she's just amazing. She looks just like the doll from the movie, and everything else that's a Blumhouse feature, you just really feel like you're immersed in those movies in this scare zone. So this is why it's my number 1.
So my number 10 house is the Museum Deadly Exhibits. So it's a museum, they have a new exhibit, the Rotting Stone. Okay, you kind of get that. You go through and it's basically night of the museum on a bad night. Like, there's the glowing rock on the wall, which I'm assuming is a rotting stone. That's kind of the only story you get going into the house. So it was like, I mean, there was the typical scares and that sort of thing. But overall, like the storyline, the house itself, just kind of fell flat for me. So it's my bottom. It's number 10. We did it once. I really don't have any desire to do it again. But yeah, so it's the bottom, number 10 for me.
So my number 10 house this year is Goblin's Feast. It's in Sprung Tent number 4. And I mean, I'm just not a gore fan, and this was really just like, oh, let's eat humans, and here's more eating humans, and let's eat more humans, and it was just yuck for yuck's sake. I mean, if you're into gore, this is going to be your house. I'm not really into gore, so it's my number 10.
So my number 9 house.
Number 9 house
for the season was the
Triplets of Terror.
It was okay. It was okay.
I was just not impressed.
The storyline, okay, they're triplets, they're killing people.
I'm not a big hack 'em up gore house kind of guy just for hack 'em up gore reasons.
It was so gory. It was so gory. Not that I don't mind gore, but it was a little bit over the top. It was a little bit too much. And the storyline it got muffled a little bit because of the gore. So if you didn't read the description before going into the house, you kind of missed like a little bit of the storyline.
So this just was not for me.
Cut back on the gore, push the storyline, it would have been better. That's why it's my number 9.
Oh yeah, it's my number 9.
So my number 8 house for this season is Goblin's Feast. So it's low on the totem pole for me because we did one through of it. I don't know if we just didn't get a good run through or if it's just the house. The storyline was cute. There was some campiness kind of going on. It didn't feel like any of the goblins were really hiding. Like they were just kind of walking around and we were walking through. But yeah, it is gory because they're eating humans. Humans are their food. We're the food. But it just, I don't know, like it just kind of fell a little short for me because I couldn't tell if we had a bad run through or if that's just the house this year. So I'm just putting it at number 8.
So my number 8 this year is Monstros, the Monsters of Latin America, is on Soundstage 23. You probably have to have some Latin American history or know your Latin American history to get the whole point behind this, because to me it just kind of fell flat. It didn't make any sense, and because I don't know the stories behind it, it didn't sit for me. So it's just solid number 8.
So house number 7 for me was Monstrous, the Monsters of Latin America. So I'm half Mexican, but I have not heard of any of these stories that are in this house. So if you haven't heard any of these stories, you're not really gonna get it. Like there's scares, there's all that stuff going on, but to understand the 3 different stories within this house, you kind of have to know the story. So that's why it's a little low on my totem pole. I felt the house was done really well, like it looked really nice inside. So the actual like theming and the costumes and stuff were done really well. But as far as like the story, like if you don't know the stories, you're not gonna get it like anything else. And we didn't really get it. I went back and I researched the stories. I get it now, but it would have been nice to get it before we went to the house. So that's why it's my number 7.
So my number 7 this year was the Museum Dudley exhibit in Sprung Tent number 1. You know, it was a museum, but I didn't see where the rotting stone was. Like, I just, you know, like Mike has his idea. I just didn't see it. It wasn't cohesive. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So that's why I put it at number 7, but I'm just not a gore fan for gore's sake, and that's why it's not my number 9 or number 10. Gore is just like not my thing. But anyway, yeah, this is number 7 for me.
So my number 6 house
is
Major Suites. So it was a scare zone a couple years ago, and it was a whole lot of fun. So this year they turned it into a house.
It's in the Fast and the Furious location. It's like the scare zone became a house, but there was so much going on. It was just very busy.
This house is insane. There's so much going on. There are three buttons you can push and activate. Something will happen.
It's like we watched the scare zone become a house. It's a good house, but it's just really busy for me. And it was so much to see. That's why we're going through it again.
It is a fun house. It's just not the best house. That's why it's my number 6.
It's my strong number 6.
My number 5 house this year is Insidious. So we did see one of the movies, and we were told that you really have to see the entire franchise to get it and understand it. I thought the house was done really well from the movie we saw, and like the references and the scares. The house was a little claustrophobic, which kind of helped with the scares. Overall, it was done really good, but it didn't quite do as well as my top 2, but it was done well. That's why it's my number 5.
My number 5 house this year is the Slaughter Cinema 2 house. It's in Sprung Tent number 2, and this was a really cool conceptual house. Mike has said that this is the second time they've done this, which is why it's, you know, number 2. And it's like all the leftover ideas, and it's really cool to kind of get an idea of what could be next or what could have been. And I've just got one thing to say: stripper mummies. So yeah, Slaughter Cinema 2 is my number 5 house this year.
So my number 4 house is Slaughter Cinema 2. This obviously is the second time they've done this. So the concept is really cool. It's like all the leftover ideas are the ones they really were pushing for, but didn't come to fruition. So we kind of get little previews of these ideas within this house. So in like kind of movie trailer format, but you're going through the real thing. I really loved the first Slaughter Cinema. It was really, really fun. I like the concept and the idea of all the different houses in one. And I really enjoyed this year's Slaughter Cinema as well. I hope I see some of these in the future. That's why I'm making this my number 4.
My number 4 house this year is Insidious the Further on Soundstage 24. Still a very, very good house. I really enjoyed this one. It was well put together, and you really feel like you're in the Insidious movies. We did watch the movies on this one too before we came through, and it was just a really good house. I had to put Ghostbusters ahead of it. I also had to put A Quiet Place ahead of it, but it is definitely my solid number 4.
So my number 3 house.
My number 3 house this year
is the Universal Monsters
Eternal Bloodlines. It's in the Sprung Tent number 3.
I really enjoyed this house. So I usually like the Universal Monster houses anyway.
I gave this one my number 3 because usually the Universal Monsters is kind of a dud for me.
I really like this one because they really try to bring out some of those the monsters that you're not quite familiar with.
This year they really did a good job of bringing the original IP monsters into like 2024.
They also mentioned that this is an all-female cast.
It was really well done as far as the original IP monsters are concerned.
Just the whole combination of the storyline, the monsters they chose, it just all came together really, really well.
So I had to give it my number 3.
My number 3 house for this season. So my number 2 house is
Ghostbusters here on Soundstage 23.
I love the way that they did this house. It totally follows the movie that it was intended to follow.
The little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men, the throwbacks to all the Ghostbuster movies. This really was a well put together house.
The house overall, they did a really good job taking you through the movie if you've seen the movie. If you haven't, there's enough in there that if you know the story of the Ghostbusters, you would enjoy this house.
The only thing I can critique on this is there's red lights on the Ecto one and not blue lights. But other than that, absolutely my solid number 2 house.
My number 2. So my number 1 house.
Number 1 house
For this season is
A Quiet Place. It's here on Soundstage 22.
I really like the way they put together this house.
I made it my number 1 because we watched the movies before we came, and this house, like, you really feel like you're in the movie The Quiet Place.
We did see the first 2 movies before we went through this house, and like, if you have seen the movies, this house is those movies. They just did a really good job.
And even though the movie, they don't really talk, they did a phenomenal job of making it scary without saying anything.
Even with the animatronics, the scare actors, everything came together for me in this house.
I highly recommend it. It is my number 1.
It's my number 1.
Okay, so it's not really a scare zone, but I think it deserves an honorable mention. So if you're in the park during Halloween Horror Nights, you've got to come to Diagon Alley and experience the Death Eaters. They're all around here. They're looking for Harry Potter. They're trying to get rid of him. And they do this really cool thing on stage, and they'll also do things next to their boxes that they have. There's a lot of interaction with them. They'll interact with you. If you play with them, they'll play with you. It's just a lot of fun, but it definitely deserves an honorable mention because it's not really a scare zone, but it kind of sort of is.
So I'm going to do a really quick, not honorable mention. So Nightmare Fuel was back again this year to do the show. Although I did like it a little bit better this year. It's a one-trick pony. It's done. They've done it just with different costumes. Please, 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 Universal, do something different next year. I would love to see Bill and Ted come back. I don't think that's going to happen, but just something else besides this show, please. All right, guys, that's it. That's our top and bottom of this year's Halloween Horror Nights event. Do you have any parting words for this year?
It was a good year. Like, I will tell you that we've been doing this now 6 years. We didn't do COVID because they had to skip a year. So we've been doing this for 6 years, and I think this is the best year so far.
Okay. So that's it, guys. This is the final night. We got to do a few more houses. We got to see everything, scare zones, all that fun stuff that we wanted to see one more time before they shut it down and they bring on the Christmas season. So if you get out here next year. We'll get to see the whole new theming and hopefully new houses and scare zones and maybe some new characters. But that's a whole year away. As always, thank you for following along these little adventures of mine. And as always, I am Mike to be. You never know where I'm going to be. I'm just going to be. You be too. I'll see you guys later. Bye.